My name is Emily Carter. 3 years ago, I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't wealthy. I wasn't featured in business magazines. I was simply a wife who believed that marriage meant building dreams together. For 7 years, I stood beside my husband, Jason Carter. When he wanted to start a business, I encouraged him. When he couldn't afford an accountant, I managed every dollar. When clients canceled contracts, I stayed up all night helping him prepare new proposals. I wasn't just his wife. I was his biggest supporter. But nobody knew that. To the outside world, Jason looked like a self-made businessman. He loved telling people, "I built everything myself." Every time I heard those words, I smiled quietly, not because they were true, but because I believed marriage wasn't a competition. If he succeeded, we both succeeded. At least, that's what I believed. As Jason's company grew, he slowly changed. The humble man I had fallen in love with disappeared. Success made him arrogant. He bought expensive watches, luxury cars, designer suits. He began surrounding himself with people who admired money more than character. And somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as his partner. Instead, I became invisible. Whenever we attended business dinners, he introduced me by saying, "This is Emily." Then he'd laugh. "She doesn't know much about business." Everyone would laugh with him. I forced a smile, even though I had prepared half the financial reports that helped him win those clients. At home, things became worse. If dinner was late, he complained. If I questioned one of his business decisions, he'd interrupt me. "What would you know? You've never run a company." Every word hurt, but I stayed, because I believed people could change. One Friday evening, Jason announced we were hosting a dinner party. More than 20 guests filled our home. Business partners, investors, friends. The atmosphere was cheerful. Everyone praised Jason's success. One investor raised his glass. "Jason, what's your secret?" Jason laughed confidently. "Simple. I never listen to people who think small." Everyone smiled. Then, he looked directly at me. Especially my wife. The room became awkwardly quiet. Jason continued laughing. "She still thinks hard work matters more than confidence." Someone joked, "Emily must keep you humble." Jason smirked. "No, she just keeps the house clean." Laughter echoed across the room. I felt my face burn with embarrassment. Not because strangers laughed, because the man I loved had invited them to laugh at me. I quietly stood, excused myself, and walked into the kitchen. A few minutes later, Jason followed. "Oh, don't be so sensitive." I looked at him. "You embarrassed me." He rolled his eyes. "It was a joke." "No, it wasn't." He sighed impatiently. "You know what your problem is." "What? You actually think you're important." Those words shattered something inside me. Over the next few months, Jason barely came home. Business trips became more frequent. Phone calls became secretive. Conversations became shorter. One night, he walked into the house carrying a folder. He placed it on the dining table. "I want a divorce." I stared at him, thinking I'd misunderstood. "What? I've already signed the papers." My hands started shaking. "Why?" He looked at me without emotion. "We've grown apart." "No, you left." He shrugged. "It doesn't matter anymore." I opened the folder. Because of a prenuptial agreement, the house would remain his. Most of our savings would remain his. The business was entirely his. After 7 years, I was walking away with little more than my personal belongings. I looked up. "Did those 7 years mean anything to you?" Jason picked up his car keys before walking toward the door. He smiled. "Without me, you'll never be anything." He paused. "I give you 6 months. You'll come begging me to take you back." The front door closed behind him. I stood alone in the silent house. Tears rolled down my face. But deep inside, a different feeling was beginning to grow. Not anger, not hatred, determination. I wiped away my tears, picked up my suitcase, looked around the empty house one last time, and quietly whispered to myself, "I'll never beg anyone for the life I'm capable of building myself." That promise changed everything. The morning after my divorce, I woke up in a tiny one-bedroom apartment. There were no expensive furniture, no luxury kitchen, just a mattress on the floor, a folding table, and one suitcase holding everything I owned. For the first time in years, no one was there to tell me I wasn't good enough. I looked into the bathroom mirror. My eyes were swollen from crying. But I made myself one promise. This is the last day I'll ever cry over someone who never valued me. The next few months were brutal. I applied for dozens of jobs. Most companies rejected me. Some said I didn't have enough executive experience. Others looked at the gap in my resume and chose someone else. Bills kept piling up. Some nights, I survived on instant noodles because they were all I could afford. But every rejection taught me something. Instead of giving up, I started studying. Every night after work, I took online business and finance courses. I learned marketing, leadership, negotiation, everything I could. Slowly, I began taking freelance consulting jobs for small businesses. One client became 3, 3 became 10. Within a year, I registered my own company, Carter Financial Consulting. The office wasn't glamorous. It was a small rented space with peeling paint and secondhand furniture. But it was mine. 2 years later, everything changed. A struggling healthcare company hired me to reorganize its finances. Within 6 months, their profits doubled. Word spread quickly. Soon, bigger companies started calling. Business magazines published articles about a woman who had built a successful consulting firm from nothing. Investors wanted meetings. Banks offered partnerships. Within 3 years, Carter Financial Consulting had grown into one of Seattle's fastest-growing financial firms. More than 500 employees worked for the company. And I was sitting in the CEO's office. The same woman who had once been told she was worthless. Meanwhile, Jason's business was falling apart. Without realizing it, the financial systems I had quietly managed during our marriage had been the foundation of his success. He ignored expenses, made risky investments, lost major clients. Within 3 years, his company was drowning in debt. Banks refused new loans. Investors walked away. Desperate to rebuild his career, Jason applied for a senior executive position at one of Seattle's fastest-growing consulting firms. He had no idea, it was my company. On Monday morning, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Ms. Carter, your 10 o'clock interview is here." I smiled. "Send him in." A few seconds later, the door opened. Jason walked inside confidently, holding his resume. He looked up, then froze. His face turned completely white. "Emily," I smiled politely. "Good morning, Jason." He couldn't speak. He looked around my office. The skyline, the awards, the CEO nameplate on my desk. Then back at me. "This company, it's yours." "Yes." He slowly sat down. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked nervous. I had no idea." "I know." Silence filled the room. Finally, Jason lowered his head. "I was wrong. I treated you terribly. I thought I was the reason for my success." He looked into my eyes. "I know now that I wasn't." He slid his resume across the desk. "I need this job. I'll do anything." I picked up the resume, looked at it for a few seconds, then gently placed it back on the table. Jason looked hopeful. "You forgive me?" I smiled. "Yes." Relief filled his face. Then I continued, "But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences." His smile disappeared. "I've forgiven the man who hurt me. But I can't trust him to help lead the company I built." I stood and walked to the door. "I truly hope you rebuild your life. But you'll have to do it the same way I did. On your own." Jason silently picked up his resume. As he reached the door, he stopped. "I'm proud of you, Emily." I smiled. "Thank you." He nodded once, then quietly walked away. I watched the elevator doors close. There was no anger left. No desire for revenge. Only peace. I returned to my desk, looked out over the Seattle skyline, and smiled, because I finally understood something. The greatest revenge isn't making someone regret losing you. It's becoming so successful that you no longer need their approval.